Afternoon. This is Deborah Jennings, and thank you for joining us for our webinar. Before we start, I just want to share with you some information about closed captioning and accessing closed captioning and accessing interpretation into Spanish. If you are looking at the screen, you'll see that for closed captioning, you can click on the icon that says closed captioning, and you're also able to go to your video settings to adjust your how large the size of the captioning will be. And there's evidently a slider to adjust the size. For those of you who are Spanish speakers and require interpretation, there's an icon that looks sort of like a globe where you can click on Spanish, and then you'll be able to access the Spanish translation. But we'd like for you to mute your original audio so you won't have both the English and the Spanish coming through on your screen. Joann, you want to go to the next screen? So let me welcome everyone to our presentation on culturally responsive service delivery to Native American families and youth. We thank each of you. It looks like we have about 30 participants today for joining us for this really important conversation about how we as parent centers can better serve Native American families with children with disabilities, and also to serve youth with disabilities. Let me first introduce myself. And I think I know many of you, but I am Deborah Jennings, and I am from the Center for Parent Information and Resources, which is located at SPAN Parent Advocacy Network. And as always, when we are joined in this kind of a presentation, we open our session with acknowledging all of the original tribes and villages whose lands we are on across this vast country that is now known as the United States. For me, I am coming to you today from what's now known as the state of New Jersey. And I acknowledge that I am on the lands of the original peoples known as the Lenni Lenape and the Delaware people. And let me now introduce our presenters.
Thank you, Deborah. My name is Joann, Sebastian Morris, and bonjour Niji, that's how we say hello, my friends. My name is Joann Sebastian Morris, and my father was Sault Ste. Marie Chippewa from the Upper Peninsula of the state now known as Michigan. And my mother was a Mohawk from the Six Nations Reserve in the province of Ontario in Canada. I grew up in the state, again, now known as Michigan, and was the traditional homelands of the Three Fires tribes, the Chippewa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. I have worked in education for about almost going on 40 years now, and most primarily in Indian education. I worked with Judy, Wiley, with the Native American Parent TA Center for 2 years, and I'm now a consultant working with Super on this wonderful Native American resources collection. I reside now in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the state now known as New Mexico, which is the traditional homelands of the 19 pueblos of New Mexico, 3 Apache tribes, and the Navajo Nation. Thank you. I'll pass it to Rosie.
Hi, aloha. My name is Rosie Rowe. I want to just thank all of you who joined us today, both Parent Center colleagues, friends, and families. I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. My father and mother were raised on Oahu on native lands. My father was pure Hawaiian, my mother was 50% Hawaiian, and I am 75% Native Hawaiian, and my parents raised 5 of us on the island of Oahu. And you should know, well, you know that there are there's other islands across the state, but the main island of Oahu is where I reside. I'm also the executive director of Leadership in Disabilities and Achievement of Hawaii. We are also the parent center for Hawaii and the Pacific states and territories. And I'm really grateful to be part of this team right now, because we've gotten a late start, as you know, as you'll see in this presentation, but it's been really wonderful working with this team. And I will pass that on to Judy.
Kadeshe, greetings, my friends. My name is Judy Wiley. I am Oklahoma Apache. I am currently an independent contractor, and I am working with Lisa Cooper and the SIPR crew. I live in Arizona, the ancestral homelands of the Wallapai tribe, the Colorado River, the Gila River tribe, and the Yavapai Nation. And the Yavapai, the word Yavapai actually means people of the sun. So I am now a people of the sun, and also the home of the Raising Special Kids tribe. Thank you. I'm glad you're all here.
Yes, so I will go ahead and get us started. Again, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. In Hawaii, it is 8:40 a.m. While all of you are ending your day, we're just beginning our day. So it's really an experience for us to join in today. And of course, you be part of this breakout session called Culturally Responsive Service Delivery to Native American Families and Youth. We'll be navigating throughout this presentation to the website as well. But before we like to know any of you where you're from. You could tell us what region you're joining us today from, if you'd like to put that in the chat box. On one of the slides, I think it's about 2 slides over, Terry, you'll see we have broken up regions from A, B, C, and D. Go ahead and take a moment and let us know which region you are joining us today from. You can see down at the bottom, there are those letters. So enter in the letter that you see your state, then we know who's all part of us. Oh, great. We see some people from A, lots of B region. Thank you for joining us. Oh my gosh.
Hey, Christy.
Thank you. C. Again, lots of A's and B's and C's.
Yeah.
I think the D people are just getting up. That would be my region.
Hi, Krista.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so what's ahead for our presentation today? Go ahead, next slide, Terry. So all of us, myself, Judy, and Joann, are working with SIPR, Center for Parent Information and Resources, because it's an excellent clearinghouse of materials. Within SIPR, we've created the Native American Resource Collection. This collection is focused on helping parent centers and others learn about Native communities, especially Indigenous parents with children with special needs. Our ultimate goal, of course, is outreach. So let's take a look at some of the objectives that we have before you. So we want to make sure we can take a tour with you so you have an opportunity to see firsthand our collection. We want to spotlight Tier 2 materials on outreach and connect you with at least one unique resource to read or explore, and then share one culturally responsive experimental activity. It's a great activity. We were practicing the last couple weeks on this activity, and it was really a lot of fun. Next slide, please.
A lot of images of Native Americans are based on fairy tales or Wild West shows. We are human beings. There's not just one Native American. We're diverse by community, by land, by language, and by culture.
This quote addresses an unspoken objective of our workshop. We want Parent Center staff to recognize us as contemporary beings, not historical figures stuck in the past. All American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian communities are widely diverse. We are also proud to spotlight the work of Ms. Joy Harjo, a Creek Indian from Oklahoma, and the first ever Native American Poet Laureate of 2019-2021. She is the author of 9 books of poetry, several plays, and children's books, and her memoir, in addition to being a musician. We offer this quote and 2 others in our slideshow and suggest that when you begin or extend your outreach to Native Americans, you consider embedding similar quotes as well as culturally appropriate photos or images in your handouts. It's a simple but effective door opener. Next slide, please. NAPTAC was funded as a technical assistance center in September 2018. The purpose of NAPTAC was to build the capacity of each parent center by providing culturally relevant materials and resources, and to build their capacity, to increase their services to Native American families in the area they serve. To achieve these goals, NAPTAC successfully completed the following. For example, developed a large volume of printed materials that are research-based, relevant, and culturally appropriate to increase outreach to Native families and shared all nationally. They also designed a new training curriculum for the first ever team of Native American parent specialists who build their parent centers' capacity to outreach to Native families. Each participant was chosen by their center director, and each was from a different geographic location. Involved these specialists in a year-long program, including in-person trainings, participation in cultural events, supports from Native experts, as well as each other. They also engaged a second training cohort. Our initiative ultimately reached and impacted 12 parent centers. Finally, these successful specialists continue the work they were trained to do with passion and commitment to work with Native American families. We are so grateful for these committed trainings. Next slide, please. The materials created under NAPTAC grant could have been lost to obscurity were it not for SIPR. This commitment, as cited on this slide, is enabling the preservation as well as the expansion of this important work. We are grateful for the support of Deborah Jennings, Lisa Cupper, and other SIPR and SPAN staff involved in this critical work. We also want to point out that in a February 2020 webinar about the resources in the collection, we were asked if we included materials about Native Hawaiians. We hadn't, since the original materials transferred to SIPR were funded by NAPTAC grant, which focused on American Indians and Alaska Natives only. Again, thanks to SIPR's commitment, they engaged a Native Hawaiian Parent Center Director, which is myself, me, Rosie Rowe, one of your presenters today. I have started to expand the cultural offerings in the collection in a most relevant way. I'm excited to contribute to this valuable library.
And we're delighted to have you with us.
Why, thank you, Joann. But if you take a look at the slide, you know, things like is responsible for updating the published print and video materials. If you look at bullet number 5, I think there, it says we'll disseminate information broadly about the Native American resource collection to non-Native and Native groups. And then finally, we'll continue to build capacity of parent centers to provide culturally appropriate services to Native families who have children with disabilities. And I wanted to just make one thing noticeable, which was really enlightening for the team that I'm working with right now. Native Hawaiians do not acknowledge being Native American. So when you are working with Native Hawaiians, they don't acknowledge that they are Native American in that Native American community. So it was really eye-opening for most of them. And of course, I had to say, you know, like, in August, we celebrated statehood, and we don't really celebrate statehood for those Native Hawaiians that are in Hawaii. So if that ever comes up, that is one of those areas that we are working on as we start to develop this library with Native Hawaiian information. Next slide, please. So the collection's design has been intentional. And so the darker blue circle, if you notice on the left-hand side of your screen, indicates our desire for parent centers to use the collection materials for professional development of current staff, as well as for new hires. The center circle shares our recognition that some parent center staff have already read a lot about various Native groups. With a wealth of intellectual content already in hand, they may not have to start in Tier 1, where a visitor explores background information about culture. They may be ready to jump right into Tier 2, where they gain ideas on how to outreach to that culture. We realize this is the first time we've mentioned tiers. Rest assured, the next slide will provide more information about that tier system. Lastly, to the right of your screen indicates our acknowledgement that some parent center staff may have had some experiences with local Native cultures in their service area or state, or they may be a member of a Native community themselves. In those instances, they might want to go directly to Tier 4 and learn more about resource groups or organizations. And now I'm going to turn this over to Joann.
Next slide, please. The collection, in addition to the intentional design of it, it also is tiered in terms of learning objectives. And we know from research that when we're learning about a culture different from our own, and one with whom we've had little or no contact, the research says we need to begin by accumulating knowledge. And so we do that by reading, by, taking in videos, webinars, etc., as long as they have culturally accurate information in them about the history, background, as well as the contemporary lives of Native peoples. So Tier 1 is what we're referring to on the slide as that background information, gathering activity. In Tier 2, then we know that after you gain some knowledge, book knowledge and, of a different culture, then you are more comfortable to go out and to meet people at different activities. You're more at ease. And so for us, and working with Parent Center or in the Parent Center world, that means outreach. So you have to learn about a different culture first, and then you can go out and reach all these new communities, especially ours. The third tier, as you get to know a different community, then you'll begin to recognize easily the different subgroups. And so there's the elders, you'll see youth, and again, the focus of our collection are the youth. And then the fourth tier, to stay engaged with the community, to stay on top of their issues. And, you know, that involves continuous learning. And so you're going to continue to look for resources that are going to help you to learn what's happening, and look for not just written material resources, but people resources. You'll meet people in Native communities who want to work with you, who will maybe do, you know, go training with you. That's happened in several instances. And you'll want to have more experiences, new experiences with that community. So once we begin our tour of the collection, you'll see that these 4 tiers cited in the research match up exactly with the tiers in the collection, you know, in the first landing page. And here we do talk about how it was not until 1974 that Native Hawaiians were incorporated into the term Native American, and it was done primarily by the federal government for the distribution of grants. And so that's the term Native American had been used for American Indians and Alaska Natives for a while, but it was new that Native Hawaiians were now also incorporated under that. But it was kind of it made it easier in terms of grant distribution for the federal government to incorporate Native Hawaiians under there. So each of the 3 groups definitely has a range of feelings about the term Native American, but it's a generic term that does include all 3 groups, and so that's the term that we are using in the collection. But we always make sure to point out too, you know, that this applies to American Indians only, or this applies to American Indians, Alaska Natives only, or this applies to Native Hawaiians only. So but we wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Okay, and then as we scroll a little bit further, thank you, Terry. Then here's again how you access the collection, and then the description of the tiers. Tier 1, Native culture and background, which I just mentioned. Tier 2 on outreach. Tier 3, Native children and youth, and then additional resources. And then you have the additional, a short background story on how NAPTAC began, and the wonderful work done in terms of compiling materials, Native authored materials, which is pretty unique. And let's see. Oh, one of the things that I did want to mention in terms of NAPTAC story, a point that is made there is that in addition to papers, you know, briefing papers, excuse me, we are also including infographics, PowerPoint presentations, webinars, and training materials. So these are all of the range of materials that you'll find within this resource collection. It's not just briefing papers. Okay, and yeah, I think again, this is still NAPTAC story. And then the last small article also is about how the leadership and disabilities and achievement in Hawaii, and in the guise of Ms. Rosie Rowe, got to join our band of merry writers and producers. Thank you. Next slide, please. Excuse me, let me just say real quickly too, at the end of each page, you'll always see those buttons that were at the end, so that you can go either to the next tier, or you can jump to any of the other tiers in the library. Rosie?
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself. I pray, therefore, that this unsatisfactory state of things may continue, and that we may not suffer further waste, that justice may be speedily granted, and that peace and quiet may once again reign over our land, Hawaii. This quote was written by Queen Lydia Kame'akaeha Ka'olamali'i Lili'u Okalani our last reigning queen in Hawaii.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Rosie. And as she said, Queen Liliuokalani was the only queen. The other monarchs had been kings. Was the only queen and the last beloved monarch to head the Kingdom of Hawaii. Oops. I just wanted to stay on Queen Liliuokalani for a minute before we move to the next. Thank you. She ruled for only 2 years. From January of 1891 until January of 1893, January 17, 1893, the date of the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii. She composed the famous song, Aloha Oe, and many other songs, and her autobiography, Hawaii's Story by Hawaii's Queen, all while imprisoned following the overthrow. This quote closes a paragraph in an 1893 letter from the Queen to a gentleman by the name of Mr. James Blount, a former congressman from Georgia, who was commissioned by President Grover Cleveland to go to Hawaii and look into the legality of the overthrow. His report, called the Blount Report, found there was American conspiracy in the overthrow and recommended that the U.S. not annex the state of Hawaii, or excuse me, the territory, the kingdom of Hawaii. But it happened anyway 2 years later in the next administration. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now we're moving into Tier 1. So this Tier 1 helps visitors take your first step in expanding outreach and service delivery to Native parents. Here you learn about culture and what values are important to them, for example. The documents in Tier 1 also help us to understand how the history between Native and non-Native cultures in America may shape how we perceive each other and how we interact with each other, even up until today. Again, on the slide under major topics, you get a hint of some of the topics that are included in this tier. And then let's see, well, if we can go to the website. Thank you. That was much faster. Appreciate that. Okay, so again, at the front end, you see a sense of some of the main topics that are included in this particular tier. And if we can scroll down just a little bit. And there, so you open with a webinar on historical perspectives for working with Native families. Oh dear, too fast. Thank you. We don't want everybody to get a bit dizzy. And down a little bit further, then continue on just at a nice, slow, medium pace. One of the things I'll point out here that in that particular webinar, this was the first time that we tried out the bingo card, the interactive bingo activity. And so this was first done in 2016. And so the card that was used by our presenter, Robin Butterfield, the card she used and her answer sheet is attached there. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, Terry, you see that it says there that there is a revision. Excuse me. Anyway, just under the thing, it says there's a 2020 revision. And so the new materials that we developed for this workshop, specifically for this workshop, including Native Hawaiian content, is now uploaded as well. And since we did it in English and Spanish, the Spanish will also be loaded there. And again, then you have the brief that goes along with that webinar, Historical Perspectives for Working with Native American Parents. And continue on. And then we talk about historical trauma, because that was significant for American Indians, Alaska Natives, for most Indigenous people. It is. And then you'll see new and improved. There's our most recent brief, Historical Trauma of Native Hawaiians. So this is the first of many documents that we will be adding to the collection. And I'll ask Rosie to just take a couple of minutes and give you a sense of what's in that brief.
Okay, Terry, can you click on that brief for just a minute? And if you can, and it opens, great. If not, I'm just gonna go ahead and talk through it. If you take a look at it, you know, there was so much information to offer, and we wanted to stay in alignment as much as possible with what was already being contributed through the Alaska and American Indian briefs. So I had to chunk it up a little bit. You guys know that word, chunking. We were chunking, that's for sure. And I've broken it up into health of Native Hawaiian, Native Hawaiians, language of Native Hawaiians, and then Hawaiian land. Lands are a big deal for us here in Hawaii. And policies of racial segregation. And then finally, the identity of Native Hawaiian people. And then doing the research, you know, I also needed to really locate, there are Native Hawaiians across the continent. Although I might be speaking about Hawaii and you would normally think of, oh, this is about Hawaii. Actually, there's, you know, many, many Native Hawaiians who are living throughout the continent. So this would help you in any of your regions that you're from to access and then get some basic information for you. We're in the process of sharing our tier 2 and 3 and finally working on 4. So hopefully by the end of October or so, we should have things finalized. But, you know, I want to make sure you know that the SIPR takes great care in making sure everything is accurate, reliable, relevant, high quality information. So it is taking us a little bit longer, but it's okay. I would prefer that be that way so that you can enjoy the important information that we have to share. Thank you, Joann.
Yes, thank you, Rosie. And we want to mention to our participants today that in addition to the slideshow that has been downloaded, that you are receiving a copy of Rosie's brief. Again, it's our newest addition to the collection, so we're very excited to share it with you. Okay, and if we go back to the slides. Okay, so there were just in tier 1, there's just, and we don't have to go back, there's just, I can make these quick points because we are doing a lot of, you know, toggling back and forth. There was a article about values and how that impacts communication, because there's been a lot of research on values, and it does show that all cultures, everybody may share the same values, but some cultures put a little more emphasis on certain values over others. And so sometimes those get in the way of communication. And so that's why we wanted to talk about that one. Again, tribal sovereignty is a really critical issue for American Indians and Alaska Natives. Sovereignty is certainly critical to Native Hawaiians as well, but it wouldn't be called the same as tribal sovereignty. And then we do have an article on education by the National Indian Education Association. And if you see articles by NIEA, that all the members of NIEA, which was started back in 1969, are American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians. So if you see reports by them, you know that they are going to be inclusive reports for you. All right, now in tier 2. Now we get into outreach, the theme of our session today. So this represents, Tier 2 represents an action phase, and where you reach out to the culture in person. To do that, parent centers need to know where and how to meet American Indian, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian parents of children with special needs, whether in rural, reservation, or in urban areas. What's the best way to introduce your parent center to Native parents? Are there specific cultural protocols that you need to keep in mind? Things you should do, should not do, say, not say, etc. Where might your PTI meet Native parents or children and youth with disabilities? What organizations or federal programs can help you? So this tier will provide specific suggestions for you. So we really do want you to have a good read and a checkout of this, of Tier 2. Before we take the tour though, I have to mention how much we love this photo that's used on the slide. And it's the LA Task PTI, who had an information booth at an outdoor powwow in California. So that's a perfect example for you of outreach, of local outreach. So now if we can click on the link again. And I'll just start talking. We begin. Yep, so then again, it gives you a sense of some of the topics, like at the bottom of the screen, it says tribal sovereignty. And then if we can stop for a minute at cultural awareness and connecting with Native communities. I think that's the next one. Oh, so there was a webinar and then the brief. Oh, excuse me, tribal sovereignty was touched on in Tier 1 as background information, and then this in Tier 2, it's how does that impact outreach. So the webinar is here and a brief in terms of outreach. So under cultural awareness and connecting with Native activities, this document and the next couple offer a lot of good tips for you of, protocols and ideas for how to, where to meet parents and educational settings in particular. But I wanted to point this out in particular because this is a favorite of a colleague who I saw was in the room, a manager with the Parent Network of Western New York, located in Buffalo, who works with a number of tribal communities in New York State. She said she keeps a copy of this particular brief in her car and reads it over when she's going to go out and pay visits to some of the communities to remind her of some of the important protocols to keep in mind. So we can continue scrolling then to the end of the tier. And again, here's some more tips, how you introduce, how to, then a webinar connecting, what are some of the barriers, opportunities. This is focusing on using education as a place to go. And then the Title IV webinar, and there's a brief following it. Title IV is a federal program. And one of the important things about Title, I said 4, it was originally Title IV a real long time ago, Title VI, under ESEA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. Now, Title VI is, people have to apply for it, but one of the things that's required within Title VI programs is they have to have parent committees. So if you know a schools near you have Title VI programs, there's a ready opportunity to go in and talk, have some time at a parent meeting, monthly parent meeting, and introduce yourself as a new resource to them. Okay, thank you. And we'll just continue scrolling. And then this is another reaching out to American and Alaska Native youth. We opened it here, but it is also, you'll also see it in the next, in Tier 3 as well, that talks about youth. So we do hope that you've seen, oh, the State Indian Ed Context is another good, excellent resource for you. Within 28 states, they're at the state level in the Department of Ed or Department of Public Instruction, however it's named. They have a staff person who is assigned to be the lead of Indian education for the state. And so those people, again, are good to know because they know what's, you know, who's who in the state. They know who are some of the more active Native community members. They can, you know, introduce you. They can tell you about upcoming events that are happening in the community where you too could have an information booth. So we do hope that you've seen some materials in this, in Tier 2 also, that interest you. And there's lots of tips, of course. And so we hope that you find something that will interest you and teach you and your colleagues. Next slide, please. Now we're going to share a game with you. This is the Native American Bingo game. And like most of you, you've probably played this game as an icebreaker, as a getting acquainted activity. But one of the things that we're going to do differently, and again, if we were in person, of course, this would be a way to get you up and moving and a little bit active. But in most get acquainted bingos, you're asking people to tell them something about themselves. But in this bingo, you're asking others to give you answers to questions about Native cultures and life ways. So I'll just quickly go through some of the instructions. Everyone starts with the Native American bingo card and a pen. Of course, just like regular bingo, you sign in free space. Go up to one person at a time, introduce yourself, ask them to answer a specific question, or what usually happens, and especially at the beginning, people run up to one another. Can you answer any question on this bingo card? If a person knows the answer, then he or she writes the answer as well as their name in that square. Like the traditional game, will continue until someone has all answers across a row, down a column, or diagonally, okay? And again, though, like traditional bingo, we have to confirm that the answers are correct. So that's why you have the person write the answer down so that you can give that answer, or your participants can give that answer. And but we are providing you with an answer sheet that whoever is hosting this, the bingo event, that only one person initially has that answer sheet. Then after you have a winner, then if all of the answers are correct, that's been confirmed, then you have a winner. But if one answer is incorrect, then play resumes. When you have a confirmed winner, then you debrief. You know, this is an activity, it's a fun activity, but it's also a learning event. So we debrief the game. So you'll share the answers to all the remaining questions, or if you're really short on time, you could ask your participants if there are any questions that they're really, really curious about, and give them the answers only to those. And then you would be sharing a copy of the answer sheet with all of the players. Now we're going to model playing the game with your involvement. Here's how it's going to go. I'm going to be reading a few questions. And till we get to a bingo, please use the buttons, again, in the chat room to, we say raise your hands. Let's just say, I guess, yes. You know, you could put in, but let's just put a Y for yes. That'll be faster for everybody. If you know the answer. And then we'll look at the tabulation. I'll state the answer. And then we're going to ask you again, how many have the right answer? Okay. And so we're going to try a few answers till we get to a bingo. So let's begin. Okay, so we do have, there it is. There's our, again, this is sort of the landscape view of what your bingo card looks like, but that's how slides are. So let's start with 11. Who knows which tribe has the largest geographic reservation? Okay, put in a Y. I can't see the tabulations, so oh, there's a few Y's and no's, yeses and no's.
Yeah, Joann, I think that was a who knows instead of a Y or an N. Who knows? Oh, you don't want who the tribe is?
Yes, that's the. Did I say Y?
It looks like Krista Rose has the answer.
Of course.
Well, if Krista Rose said it's the Navajo Nation with its 17 plus million acres, then Krista is right on. Oh, and Christy as well. All right. So number 11 is correct. It is Navajo Nation.
They have been well trained.
I think so.
All right, now let's see. We're kind of going to focus on this. You know, use something from the free space here. Who knows the names of the 2 official languages in Hawaii? If you do, say, you know, put in a Y. If you don't know, you don't have to put in an N, but we'll just see.
Well, somebody does. Beverly knows.
All right.
Beverly Reedy, would you like to tell us what those are?
Oh.
Or one of those?
Yes, she would. Yes, she would.
Does she work for you, Rosie?
Yes, she does.
Right, Beverly, thank you. Yes. Hawaii is the only state in the nation that has 2 official languages. And of course, it's English as well as the Hawaiian language. And Hawaiian has been in their state constitution as an official language since 1978. How about that, everybody? All right. Now let's do some that more of you should be able to answer. 14. Who has read a book by an American Indian, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian author? Okay. Oh, there we go. Yeah, many more yeses on this one. Yep. All right. Now, unfortunately, because we're not live and we can't chat that easily, if we were in you know, seeing in person, then we would be able to say, okay, who are you reading? Who are some of the Indigenous authors who you're reading? We'd be able to ask, what are the titles? Are you reading Tommy Orange's They're There? I know Deborah has read that. Are you reading some of Joy Harjo's poetry? I mean, there are just so many Indigenous authors out there that it would be fun to share that information with each other, but you can do that at another time at one of your own events, okay? But so we do have yeses for number 14. All right, so let's try another corner, see what, let's see. 5. Who can name 4 American Indian tribes, including one in or near your state? Okay, let's have, oh, all right, Anna, Robin, Tiffany, thank you, Beverly, Jeanette. Woo! All right. Thank you. Lots of yeses on that one. Thank you, thank you. And for those of you who weren't sure, thanks, Jen. She even named them. For those of you who weren't sure, we kind of gave you three answers when we started, because Judy is Apache and I am Chippewa and Mohawk. And so you just need to know one near your state. And we say in or near your state because not every state has a tribal, a tribe there or a reservation there. So, okay. Number 12, let's start zeroing in on that free space. Who knows the year in which the territory of Hawaii gained statehood? Ooh, already couple of fast Ys. Ah, all right. Oh, we even got an answer. Yes. Hawaii became the 50th state in 1959. There's another person who knows 1959. Possibly August 21 of 1959, someone thinks. All right, thank you. Thank you. So we have another X and a correction in 12. So we've got 11, 12, and 14. How about 13? Who knows what a potlatch is? Those of you from the Pacific Northwest and Alaska should know that.
So while everybody's answering, I got to tell them while we were practicing, I was like, what is a potlatch? I'm thinking it's a clay pot.
Yeah, or a latch to a pottery. It's not that.
Oh, gosh.
Anyone else?
Christy knows.
Yeah, Cheryl. Oh, excellent. Yes. Yeah, Cheryl, good one. Yes, so Cheryl even got the answer correct. Yes, a big feast. Yes, it is. So we had at least, yes, good. We had several responses that were correct. So if you said it was a feast, it was what in Indian country we call a giveaway. It's a form of gift giving. It's a form of wealth distribution. And it is, practiced in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, a very traditional practice that after Alaska was purchased by the U.S. from Russia, the U.S. got kind of concerned about the wealth distribution aspect and they banned it for a while, but it is still going on. So, all right, well, thank you. We have a bingo. Yay! Our sender row across. So now one of the just a couple other points about the game, and I did see a comment that someone said this is fun. So it is fun, but it is also meant to educate. And you could, when you do this in your own locality and at your when you do a next professional development for your colleagues, or in the community with a Native community, then you could even offer a prize. So we're sorry we can't give you a prize today, all of you smart people who came up with the answers. When we as trainers use icebreakers of any kind, we know that we're allowing participants to relax a little bit, to let go, enjoy each other's company, and learn from each other, not just us all the time. And so what happens following the game is that the mood is lifted in the room, there's a better exchange of energy, but it also opens them to your message following the game. If you have to give an update on what's happening, or if you're just introducing your parent center to a Native American community, then you've got a more captive audience. They're with you. They've become engaged. And so again, along with today's slideshow, you will also have the instructions to how to do this game. You'll have the bingo card, and you'll have the answer sheet, again, in English and in Spanish available to you. So one of the things, let me say too that you can also modify this if you want to. We wanted to model showing all three groups that are included under the label of Native American. But you could change this too if you work with, in your state you have a select group, or your region, wherever you're working, you have certain tribes you work with. Then, add some other information about them and other tribes within the state. If you're going to let's see, if you're in Oklahoma, you can have 40 tribes in that state. So you could make a really excellent bingo card. And you could change it up too, to, increase your range of options and activities to use with, Black communities, with Latino, Hispanic communities, Latinx communities. Then, use this, you'll have the model and just change the content. But we really, our purpose today though, is to sharing it with you, is that we urge you strongly to please use this in your outreach with our communities. They will be so happy to see that you are using an activity that relates to them, that you took the time to find something that they could relate to. And even though their tribe may not be listed here, they're still going to enjoy learning about other Native groups. So they'll be so surprised and just, it's going to be wonderful, because you're breaking down barriers and building up trust when you include their culture in your presentations. So thank you. And now Judy will take us back to the tiers for the last two. And so I turn it over to Judy. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to let you ladies know that you have 10 minutes left. We have a hard stop at 3:50.
Oh man, wouldn't you know when I come on, Terry?
Sorry, Judy.
Pressure's on. Okay, I seriously can't even see the clock.
3:55. 3:55.
Okay. I'm drinking herbal tea, so I'm not going to talk really fast. I didn't have coffee this morning just for that reason, but now I have to talk fast because of Joann. Okay, thank you, Rosie and Joann. And Terry, you don't have to go to the website. I can just highlight some of the things in the website. So we're hoping people after this session will jump over into the SIPR website and check out all these tiers and get information, but you don't have to do it right now. After one's gained background knowledge about a culture, which was tier 1 that Joann covered, and after she or he has begun outreach and interacting with Native parents, tier 2, one becomes familiar enough to recognize subgroups within that culture. A subgroup that NAPTAC wanted to emphasize, as did the U.S. Department of Education, is of course youth. Tier 3 provides a wide variety of materials relating to Native American children and youth, as you can see from the major topic bullets on this slide. The collection includes a document describing how Native preschoolers are unfairly disciplined, and 4 of the resources detail how Native parents can address bullying and cyberbullying and building resilience in their youth. And there's also a brief offering a unique American Indian Alaska Native perspective on transition planning. So as you scroll through the tier, you'll notice that there are 2 versions of resiliency. The first is specific to parent center staff. The second version was written directly to Native youth. This brief informs youth about resiliency, and it can be used as an outreach activity with Native adults. For a training session or other outreach event, bring copies of this handout to give to Native parents who attend. They will be so impressed that your center has created a document specifically for their youth, which will leave them with a more open ability to speak to you about your parent center. So again, this handout was developed specifically for you to take to an information table, health fair, workshop that you're doing, that you don't have to change anything on it. You might want to put your logo on it or put your parent center name and address on it, but it is ready to go right as it is. Next slide, please.
It's the parents we need to talk with and to listen to. They know their kids better than any school ever will.
Thank you, Joann. The Alaskan Native elder quoted here, Sidney Huntington, was a longtime member of his local school board. He had a deep belief in the power of education, as well as in the power of cultural knowledge and beliefs. When young people know who they are culturally, they are more grounded and less likely to act out against others and society at large. Mr. Huntington grew up in a subsistence lifestyle in rural Alaska. He freely shared those unique life-saving skills with anyone who asked, especially young people. The elders' words shared with you today remind us that we can't prejudge what's best for people's children. We must reach out to parents directly. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to have to try to do this in a chat room really quickly. So we want to know how many of you, just put yes for yes and in for no, have been to the Native American Resource Collection, let's say within the last 6 months. How many of you have been there to visit, to get resources, to download something? Thank you all for responding. Oh, Jen Cole.
Yeah, all right.
Yes. And if your answer is yes, we are delighted that you've been there. If no, no judgment. Perhaps you just found out about it today, and as soon as we get off, you're heading over there. People are busy and unaware that the collection exists, so we're happy that you'll take the time now to go in there and find out about it. Also, we want you to visit frequently because, as you heard with the Native Hawaiian information, we are constantly updating and adding resources to our library. So please just don't go there once, but continually go back there. And hopefully we'll be announcing when we have new materials. Oh, see someone, Robin said, can't wait to check it out. Okay, great. We're glad you're all here and you can find out about the library's unique materials. Next, please. Okay, we are so excited to have Tier 4. Special thank you to Lisa Cooper for getting this up for us and getting it so we can share it with all of you today. This has been a long time making, but we are very excited about it. So during the NAPTAC training conducted with Parent Center staff across the country, we developed unique worksheets and training activities. The bingo game was one of them. That actually was started from one of the trainings we did. Some of these are introduced in our webinars. And as you can see from this slide, Tier 4 includes worksheets, training material, as well as a wide range of other resource lists, such as there's a list of the Bureau of Indian Education schools. There's a list of the Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Centers. So there's all kinds of lists and resources that you can use. One of the most well-liked resource documents titled Reaching Out to Native Youth offers 8 pages. Yes, I said 8. 8 pages of descriptions of organizations that focus entirely on working with American Indian and Alaskan Native youth. So if you're just starting out working with Native youth, I would start there. A frequent visitor to the library will notice that this valuable resource can be also found in Tier 3 on Native children and youth, as well as in Tier 4 covering resources and additional information. This is intentional. We cannot know the knowledge or expertise of each of you or a future visitor, has about the Native culture and families. So it's possible a visitor can go directly and exclusively to Tier 3. In such a case, we want the visitor to find all materials relevant to that tier in one place. So don't worry if you see some items, primarily resource lists, repeated in more than one tier. Next slide, please. Okay, our objectives. Let's see how well we did from our objectives. Okay, the first one is, did we take you on a tour of the new but ever expanding collection? Yes, we did. We highlighted outreach throughout, not only in Tier 2, but we offered 3 Indigenous quotes as examples of what can be added to your training or handouts. We also incorporated an outdoor powwow as a perfect example of reaching out at a common community event. We highlighted the outreach brief that one of our colleagues loves and keeps in her car. We suggest the brief on resilience written directly to Native youth as a perfect handout to share with Native parents. And 2 briefs on bullying and cyberbullying were also written with an eye to share with our communities. Number 3, in each tier, we highlighted at least one brief that we hoped would spark your interest to help you to delve further into the topic. Number 4, we shared a culturally appropriate interactive bingo game that is perfect to use as a valuable icebreaker, get acquainted activity in all 3 Native communities. Next slide, please. Okay, now that we've covered all the tiers, we want to know, does anybody have any questions? Thank you, Deborah, for putting in the chat box the link to get directly to the library.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, I believe we have 5 minutes. Is that right, Terry?
Yes, ma'am, 5 minutes.
Thank you.
okay.
So if you do have a question, it's probably most efficient to type a question, but you can unmute yourself if you would like.
See how thorough we are? No questions.
You all did a wonderful job. Thank you
We're
so
just
much.
efficient trainers. That's all.
So Ann Armel says, will this website have
States.
information on resources specific to states' Native peoples?
A lot of our contact lists are put in state order. So like if you're looking for the state
specific
education director, they're in state order. So you know, Arizona, Alaska, Alabama, and you can just look under your state for those contacts. It's the same with the Voc Rehab list. I know a lot of the lists are state specific, so you can get lots of information for those.
And we'll be adding Native Hawaiian contacts eventually, but right now there's nothing on there for that.
Yeah.
That will be coming up.
Yeah, so again, if you're looking for a specific age group or topic group, you can go to Tier 3. If you're looking for resources, Tier 4 would be where I would go.
Yes.
Okay, now we have
Just
3 minutes left.
Okay,
Uh,
Rosie?
If there are questions that are left unanswered, you can put them in the Q&A, which is in Whova in the app, and these ladies can go back and check it as we go forward the next few weeks. And please go ahead and fill out your session feedback form. That's also available in Whova. It's, the standard evaluation for a session. We really value your feedback so that we know what we can do better or differently the next time. Hopefully you all did not have too many troubles with the Whova app. We are still learning as administrators, just as you're learning as attendees.
And we'd like to say a special thank you to Deborah Jennings and Lisa Cooper at SIPR for allowing us to develop materials specifically for parent centers, because that's what we want to do. We want to get information to parent centers.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and the session feedback has now been put in the chat. So thank you, Deborah Jennings, for putting that in there.
And Terry
Yes, ma'am.
and Johan, our tech support folks, I want to give them a big shout out because they really helped this to go really smoothly.
Yes, it did.
And thank you so much, Rosie, Joann, and Judy. It is absolutely a pleasure to work with each of you. I think Lisa Cooper is on here, and she has been our driving and guiding force. And this team of women are just really awesome to work with. And we are super, super proud to be able to share these resources with you and, you know, this collection and have it to be so well organized so that you can find what you need and really, you know, find it, grab it and use it and really help to make a difference in so many communities where we know that there is such a huge need for our services. So I invite everyone to make sure that you visit the resource collection and especially to make sure that you put it to use. Thank you all for joining us. And we all have to now head over to the session with Dr. Rosemarie Allen. And I know that you're going to really just love hearing a lot of what she has to say because it really follows along with what we've been discussing about equity and about bias, equity, and serving and reaching families who are of various cultures. So thank you, and
We noticed
see you
that.
shortly.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank
And thank you.